Larney Fowler.
Yeah, I'm Larney. I guess I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict and a Yankee fan, although that's not very good these days. They lost again today, but I want to thank Andrea and the entire Pursch family. This has been a great gathering, and thank all the people at Brio. This is one of Joe's favorite places. He and I, God, we had so many dinners here, and I used to sing here on open mic night. Larry, you don't have to worry. I'm not going to be competing with you, but and he loved me singing Dean Martin and Bobby Darin, and we came here, God, so many times. But I know they always tell you to say something funny to begin with, so some people will get a crack out of this. I was talking to my mom today, who's 89 and a half and lives in Palm Beach, Florida. Knew Joe, came out to Family Week, was very impressed with him. But she's got some cognitive impairment, and I was telling her, hey, I'm going to Dr. Pursch's celebration of life. Elizabeth, my daughter, her granddaughter's coming down, and I sort of reminded her who Dr. Pursch was and why I'd seen him, and she goes, dearie, I had no idea you had an addiction problem. I love you, Mom. But anyway, yeah, I think everyone has pretty much said it. I'll spend a few minutes. I did post on Facebook Father's Day evening. I was fortunate enough to get a call from Andrea, so I got to spend the day before Father's Day at his beautiful condo up here in Table Rock, holding his hand, kissing his forehead, and basically saying goodbye to him on behalf of Thomas, Larry, Buzz Aldrin. Some of these people have already come out, so I'm not breaching confidentiality, but that was very special. I went through treatment in 1983 in June. Obviously, I experimented a little bit because I'm still a week behind Thomas, who went there he went there in November of '83, and I can't catch up with him, but you can get Thomas a drink, please? No, but he was special. I probably, unlike most doctor-patient thing, we probably crossed the line a bit because I didn't see him regularly as a psychiatrist for any long period of time, but we became extremely close friends. I mean, we would come here all the time. He introduced me to my sponsor, Ted Foley, and we would talk about current events and books, and he loved the old Hollywood movies, and we had wonderful talks. I think my daughter, when she was in grade school or high school, was doing a paper on Sigmund Freud, and she met with Joe at the restaurant near his where he lived, and they had a long talk about Freud. So she remembers him very well. He cut to the chase. There was no bullshit with Joe, and some of this stuff is public knowledge, so I'm not divulging any confidences, but when Betty Ford arrived at the Long Beach Treatment Center and was shown to the room where she was going to sleep with 3 other women in a sort of a bunk bed situation, she sort of raised her eyes and she said, forget this. Sort of like Larry saying, where's the bathroom? And Joe said, that's the way it is. You either, you can stay or you can leave. And she stayed. And so Joe was big on the tough love. But, early on meeting, he always said to get back into the mainstream of life, and hanging out with Thomas and David Gray and PJ. And I can remember going to that Coyote Grill several times for brunch with Buzz Aldrin, and that's where I learned that, and Buzz has an ego, and he went to the moon, so although he's the second man on the moon, and I remember when I first met him, he always said, Larney, Neil may have been the first man to step on the moon, but I'm the first man that pissed on the moon, because he let it go in his spacesuit. But I think Joe touched a lot of us. I think Andrea, when she called me, I think the day before I went to see him, 2 days before he died, I was bawling like a baby on the phone, and then she said, God, and I spoke to Thomas Henderson, big NFL Super Bowl guy, and he was bawling like a baby on the phone. And when she asked me to put the speakers together. I'm not quite sure why I put myself after Larry Gatlin and Thomas Henderson, but anyway. But Joe was, my father died when I was almost 8, and I think Joe was, he was definitely one of the most influential men in my life. And he definitely saved my life. His humor was, I mean, his wit, his intelligence, and how much he cared for people. But his humor, if you look at that LA Times article from 1992 by Joe Bell about how he came to this country, penniless, and he goes to Detroit, becomes a window washer on these skyscrapers, hundreds of stories above the ground, and he goes, I started at the top of American industry at 90 cents an hour. He had that humor. But I remember some of the things he told me was, in therapy, he said, you need to learn to be mature. You have to accept yourself as you are. If you need 6 or 7 drinks to be sociable, you are not a party boy from Princeton, you're a boozer. And if you need cocaine to be brilliant, you are not a visionary egghead, you are a cokehead. He talked about how Freud in 1885 took small doses of coke regularly to abolish his fatigue, but by 1890 he and his other doctors stopped taking it because it was so addictive. And I can remember one of the last things I can never forget this, because he just had a way with words. He said he talked about tranquilizers and all that. He goes, if you take one, you are tranquilized. If you take a few, you are hypnotized. If you take a handful, you are eulogized. I mean, he just had yeah. And he wasn't one of us. I mean, he was, but he wasn't. And he was just such a special guy, and he really cared about his patients, whether they were famous or not. I can remember 2 things about Joe, which I'll close with. And one of them is he really was very touched by his practice. I was telling my brother today, I think I'll say that Joe was very humble, and my brother says, I wouldn't describe him as humble, But he confided in me one time, and he was very emotional, and this is public knowledge, I'm not preaching it. He said probably the biggest disappointment in his career, or one of them, was treating Bill Holden, who just died a loner in his apartment in Santa Monica. I think drank, hit his head on the bed, and they found him a couple of days later. But Joe, that always stuck with him, was how he couldn't help Bill Holden. And there's certainly been friends of mine who've passed away over the last few years who were affected by the program, and I wish they had met Joe. I think I'll close with this. Some of you here know my dear friend Bernie Trifoso, who I became friends with over the last 5 or 6 years. He'd moved out here, and he died earlier this year, so it's sort of been a tough year. I'd lost Bernie and then Joe. But Bernie was a World War II veteran at Normandy, stormed the beaches. He was in Okinawa. He was a medic in the Coast Guard, most incredible guy, just amazing. Became a very dear friend. And I'll never forget, it was probably early 2020, and we were eating at Jack's. The one time we didn't come to Brio, and I said, I'm going to bring my friend Bernie, who was in the World War II. And I brought Bernie, and I know Joe could be humbled, and his he was such a success story coming here, and he believed in the American dream. He believed in, you put your mind to it, you can become pretty much anyone or anything you want. And he'd escaped the perils of Nazism and communism and Yugoslavia and all that stuff. And he met Bernie And I'll never forget, the tears came down his face. He was just crying uncontrollably because Bernie had helped save Europe. Anyway, I want to thank you all, and I love Joe.
Thank you, Larney.